Hey everyone, welcome to Win with Content by Hereto. It's where we talk about big wins in content projects with experts or people who've been on these projects. I'm Patrick Bozick, and today with me is Mark Gross from Data Conversion Laboratories, sometimes known as DCL. Welcome, Mark. Glad to have you.
Thank you. Thank you, Pat. It's great to see you.
It's great to see you too. I gotta say, you have a very interesting background there. It's like you were in a library. Did you build that yourself, or?
This is, when I didn't realize when I built, this is my study, and I built it, about 10 years ago. Didn't realize that I was building a set for all these meetings that I'm going to be doing in video. But it's ironic, maybe I spend 95% of my time in digital, but I love books, and I have a pretty extensive library, so it's
That's awesome. It's a fantastic background, and it seems like it's probably served you well through these very difficult times that we've been in with all the Zoom and everything going digital.
Yep.
Cool. So we've got a really interesting case study today that we want to talk about. It's a big project that DCL worked on, a few years back. So you want to just kind of give us the high level of who you are, who DCL is, what you guys work on before we jump into the talking about the situation.
Sure. So we're a data conversion laboratory. Our business is converting content, and it's really taking unstructured information and turning it into structured information, which is really we've been doing this for over 40 years, well before XML and before DITA and before any of these structuring technologies. But there were things back then also that needed to be done, and that's what we and as industry developed and as the world advanced in terms of data, that's really what we've been doing. And when we started out, people said, gee, what are you going to do when everything is converted in the next year or two? But we all know that's not happened, because there's more and more and more content every day. And we used to talk about megabytes, now we talk about terabytes. And structured information is more important than ever, and that's why we have systems like Hereto and content management system, because there's just too much to handle otherwise. So that's what we do.
I wonder if I was one of the people that asked you
and that's
what you were going to do and everything
was about today.
Yeah, I was wondering if I'm one of the people who's asked you many years back what you were going to do when everything was converted, but probably not. So, all right. So before we jump into the situation today, I just want to remind everyone that if you want to, you can ask us a question on every time. There's a button that says ask a question. You go ahead and click that. We can't write you back, but we can read your questions and answer them live on the show. So we do appreciate that. It's always a lot of fun. I'll just remind everybody that this show is recorded. So after the fact, we encourage you to use the same link that you came here to come and see us, to share this with your friends, colleagues, family, coworkers, whoever you think might be interested in the topic that we have today. Okay, great. So with that, let's actually jump in and talk a little bit about the situation that you guys were brought in to help with. We got a slide here. If it'll load for us. There we go. All right. So you want to give us an overview of what you were brought in, what the situation was when you guys started working with this organization?
Sure. So I think this is about a year and a half ago that we started working on this project, and it's not untypical. I mean, this was a manufacturing company. The problem they have is their documentation was InDesign. They had PDF documents. And it was getting more and more unwieldy. Not an uncommon situation, because as you build new products and you add new products, you add more manuals, you add more content. And today, people are moving away from paper content, from PDF documents. So it's like some of my background may be obsolete in the commercial world, and it was taking longer and longer to produce all this. You produce a new product, you got to update it, you got to maintain it, and you got to keep going with that. And I think the biggest game changer has been translating the languages, because now instead of just dealing with one set of documents, you suddenly have to deal with multiple documents, and every time something changes, you got to, and pretty soon you're dealing with not, the 10 documents you started with, but 100 documents and 200 documents. Then you multiply it by languages, you've got thousands of documents, and as we become a more global world, many organizations are faced with producing documents in multiple languages. So all that led to a situation where it's becoming unwieldy. Their costs of producing documents are going high, and the costs of translating were going high, and everything else was going on. So they were looking for a solution where they can, that build once, use many, so they can produce many different versions of documents.
Yeah. So this is
basic, I think, overall here.
This is something I think that we both run into just a number of times over the course of our career, right? So you have an organization that's still doing everything by hand. Like that is the definition of InDesign, right? So if you're producing your output in something like InDesign where you're laying it out, you have a direct linear equation to number of people to the amount of content you can put out. And you come in and this isn't scalable anymore, right?
Right. It doesn't scale because you've got to do everything one at a time, and every change means you've got to change it in dozens of places. So that's just balloons as you move along, and it's all that luggage you're carrying from year to year to year just gets larger and larger. It's a bigger pile of information that you've constantly be dealing with. So it comes down to how can you scale that, and how can you set up something that if you change it in one place, it'll ricochet through the entire document set so that it's all there all the time and timely, right? Nobody wants to wait a year for their document.
Yeah, and the other thing I think is amazing about this, that it still exists, is that InDesign is one experience, right? So like when you create something in InDesign or something like that, I mean, Word, anything that's hard copy like that, that's the only experience you get. And the average consumer, what is it? It's like 5 to 7 different channels that they'll check or they'll interact with in the process of buying or using something through a life cycle as a product today. So it's just, you are by definition unable to accomplish your goals. So this is the classic case, right? You come in, traditional desktop publishing process, there's just cost overruns, really painful manual process. So we're really just looking at the really traditional business situation that, got people starting to think about structured content. Does that sound about right?
That sounds right. I think every manufacturing company has that issue. I mean, it goes across all kinds of industry groupings. What we're talking about here today is a manufacturing companies, but everybody's got lots of content is doing that. And I think we all know that our research and where we're looking for information is on the web, and that's where we start getting information. And you expect it to be available on your handheld device. You expect to have it in lots of different places. So if you don't have the information in all those places, you're missing opportunities both in making sales, but perhaps more importantly in customer service, that you're not able to answer people's questions. And nobody's waiting 48 or 72 hours for an answer these days. Everybody's expecting things to be there right away. So the only way to do it is,
you've seen the research that has come out around like customer effort score and customer experience as people relate it, as it relates to brand loyalty. And these are the biggest determining factors of brand loyalty today. And like you said, like people who have to wait, they're not loyal. It's just how things work. So let's move on to the solution, because I think everybody knows where the solution's going here, but there's some really interesting aspects of it because of the technology you guys employ and the way that you guys go about this. So I really, I want to give you the broad solution, but then I want to talk a little bit more about Harmonizer. So, talk us through this.
Okay, so so the broad solution is, how do you convert information from into DITA? How do you take all your documents and so DITA by itself, DITA is a component management process. You want to take all the little bits of information you've got in your document and establish them in a way that that you can reuse them in many different ways. Instead of having a 50-page manual, you end up with 100 or 200 segments that you're going to be using. So that way you can interrelate and collect them in different ways, and also you can move around. That's what a system like Pareto allows you to do. So that is what we do. We do all that stuff of taking things apart and turning them into DITA components. I think the specific thing we were going to talk about today is one thing you gain by doing, besides having the components, is that you can reuse your information. If the same a paragraph or 2 paragraphs of information appears in 100 different places, you only have to have it once and it'll appear automatically in those different places, which means not only do you save and management your information, it's a lot less information you need to deal with, but also if you have one paragraph to change, and that change will flow across your entire stream of everything you're doing. So that's really what you want to do. But finding all that information in your document set where that is reusable used to be a really burdensome process, and people would sit there with their pages spread out all over conference table with lots of little yellow stickies of what things are there. And so what we provide, what we built is just to help us get through this and help our customer get through this is a product called Harmonizer, which goes through an entire data set and identifies all the sections that are identical to each other. That's the easy one. But it also identifies the things that are similar to each other. So as we all know, as you if you're building things, if you're building documents one at a time, even if you're copying and pasting, you're making little changes as you go along. So just looking for identical things is not going to find all those things. That little comma that got changed to a semicolon, and a word or two that got changed, or if it got changed for a British version of something and now using a different word in that paragraph, all those things would not be found. So Harmonizer was built to find all those similar sections and build reports that identify where exactly in the document does something exist. This paragraph exists 38 times, and here's where they exist. This appears in those places, and that provides a tool that lets you work on these documents in advance. So that's what Harmonizer does. I mean, it lets you remove duplicates, which is very nice. The other thing is there are other effects that we didn't even realize when we first built this. It lets you find typos and misprints, because sometimes a word got changed and it's the wrong word. And so if you have a paragraph appearing 12 times, and 11 times it's one way, and the 12th time it's another way, there's probably something wrong with that 12th paragraph. So this is a process that helps us do that. And also by categorizing this information this way, it gives us something that especially in a manufacturing environment, you're building sophisticated, complicated equipment, you need your subject matter experts to be able to look through things. This simplifies the process. They don't have to look at hundreds of thousands of different places. They have to look at the one item, that the one version of it that they need to be doing. So these are all. It's a tool that lets you build the process more quickly. And the nice thing about it is it's something you can do in parallel to everything else. As you're installing systems, you're implementing systems, there's a lot going on. This piece of it can be done independently of everything else. So you can get a head start. So when you're ready to implement, everything goes in at once.
So there's a lot of that to unpack, Mark. Let's see if I can pull a couple of things out of there. We can highlight them. So you guys found that the solution was going to be implementing structured content, in this case using the DITA standard, and adding the right level of metadata to it with taxonomy. So that was where you wanted to be, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was going to be what you needed to really drive the next set of efficiencies and the ROI that we're going to talk about in a minute here, which was great because they tracked all this stuff. But in getting there, you realized that there was going to be a lot of work to find where there was similar content. You really had to upgrade the content, right? So you had to be able to take this content and pull out the sections that were going to be similar and link them, structure them properly, harmonize them. Really, I mean, I'm assuming that's where the name of the product comes from. It's not a big jump, right? So what you guys did is you came in, you took the source of content, you identified where it was going to go, and then you ran this process that was able to really standardize and normalize the content, but also in the process upgrade it by picking out the similar sections.
Correct. Right. I mean, it's exactly what it is. That's not, I don't know if to reword what you said. That's exactly what happened over here. And the process is one where Harmonizer can take the whole stack of document, 100,000 pages, and just process it once and provide all those reports. And also provides that the ROI analysis of it can show you that 50% of your paragraphs in your document set are identical to each other. So right away, lets you have a good sense of where your eye is going to be. If you can reduce the amount of content you have to manage in half or even more than that, that should be helpful in understanding how much money their company's going to save over time.
So as a component of the solution, you're actually able to get to a reuse number, which is a major component of an ROI. And then analysis happens automatically through this process.
Absolutely right. Right.
And that's really interesting because that's something that a lot of organizations struggle with, is that when they get into this and they're doing their ROIs, they really find themselves having a hard time putting the actual numbers in place until they get way down the road, right? And when you're looking at, annual budgeting cycles or quarterly reporting, not being able to nail down an aspect of ROI quickly is often really, really challenging. So, being able to do that, I think, is really helpful. I think that's a really important point.
Right. And it lets you do it against their actual content rather than using global numbers. And that's where it really matters.
Got it. Great. So what did this organization have to do to get ready for you guys to help them implement this solution?
So, I mean, in this case, I mean, once they get these reports back, I mean, it's this gives them a tool that they can go and clean out their content and figure out. I mean, it's like that moving analogy. When you move stuff from one system to another, you don't want to move everything over. You want to be able to cut it down and be able to work with. So if they start early enough in the process, they can go and clean up their content before they do that. So they can go in and wherever things are similar to each other, they can go in and decide if that similarity is critical, if it's really similar, or they really need different versions of it. And that gives them the ability to figure out what they need to design, what they need to do in their DITA conversion to be able to produce what they need. So it's a tool that really lets them start really early on and clean up their content and say, this is what we're going to end up with, and then the rest of it can be done in a more automated manner. So
what is a company, if a company's thinking of going through this process, how much time should they be budgeting for curating the content? Like, what is the allocation to that going to be as a part of the solution?
Right. So it depends on how much material they have, but my sense is if, let's say, a company has 100,000 pages of material, there really should be a lot. They really should start as early as possible and ideally allow something like 6 months to curate their material. I have to say that most companies don't provide that much, and then you sort of have to finesse it a little bit. But my concern always is that if it's an afterthought and they're not doing anything till the very end, they end up doing the conversion. It'll work, but they're not going to get all the benefits of the reuse, and many times they don't get the benefits of reuse. They get all the other benefits of having everything in components. So I think giving themselves time, and I think for like that 100,000 page kind of content, I think a 6 month time to curate is the right kind of time.
Is that FTE for 6 months, or is it, I mean, like, what's the level of like effort you think there?
No, I mean, once we produce for the Harmonizer piece of it, once we produce it, which really gets done over a couple of weeks, then they have the material they need to be able to work with it, and then we can start converting over time and make it a more leisurely process. But, I mean, frequently a whole conversion is done in 2 to 3 months. So it's and then it becomes more of a process. So we're talking about the ideal. It shouldn't be an afterthought, because then you sort of don't get the maximum benefits that you'd like to have.
Yeah, I got it. Okay, so we want to move on to the onto the results here, because these are great results. But we do have a question that I want to grab from the audience before we move on. So somebody wants to know, this time around, this organization seems like they had mostly InDesign, but like, what if you've got a bunch of different types of content? So you've got some stuff in HTML and some stuff in this, some stuff in that, InDesign, et cetera, et cetera. What kind of complexity does that create in the process of going through and standardizing everything, especially as it relates to the conversion?
Right, so in terms of identifying the materials, it doesn't add complexity at all, really. Well, I mean, our process handles all kinds of XML content, Word content, InDesign content, even PDF content. With PDF, we usually do some pre-processing, because PDF is not really a print it's really a print format rather than a data format. So not everything is pulls out very well. So we do that, but otherwise, almost everything can be handled in the Harmonizer process and provide all that information. So there's a little more complexity, but it's all designed to do that. And we do that all the time. And people typically have 2 or 3 or 4 different formats that they're using.
So pretty standard, but it's probably going to make it just a little bit more complex.
Yeah.
Kind of got it. Okay, great. Yeah, let's talk about how this turned out. All right. So here's the win. Let's talk through this.
Okay, so actually, it's I thought this company was very, very impressive in that they really collected a lot of information, because they really wanted to have some good post analysis on all this. But what they did is were able to increase tremendously amount of the work they were doing, and at the same time reduce their spend, which is the kind of results you want to be able to show.
So they actually doubled their volume.
They just about doubled their volume. In projects completed. They went from something like 60 or 70 projects they were doing to something like 100, 120, 130 projects. So over a period of that year and a half, I guess 2 years, they were able to increase double the work they were doing. One of the ROIs one of the claims they made in their ROI is that they will be able to almost completely reduce their desktop publishing costs, because they were going into this kind of process that would automatically do the publishing. And in fact, that's what happened, a 94% decrease. So they went from a fairly significant amount of desktop publishing they were doing to virtually eliminating it. And what they had left was things that really needed to be done in a particular way. Which proves the case. I mean, a lot of people are always thinking in terms of, how can I automatically publish things that won't look exactly the way I want it? I won't have an art director moving an image to the top corner instead of the bottom corner. And the reality is that you don't really need that for most kinds of publications. The automation works really well. There may be some leftover sheets that have to be in a particular way, but otherwise it's not really needed.
Yeah, I want to jump in here and say that that's a really common result, is that desktop publishing is either like eliminated or virtually eliminated. And I think this is a really important thing to note on that too, is that a lot of organizations that are coming from, what's kind of a print or a digital print type of a background, when they get to structured content, part of that process is actually moving to web delivery. So they're going to a place where instead of having the PDF or the printed PDF be the primary way that people are accessing their content, the primary way is now through a website or through an app or through their software or whatever it might be. And the reality is that desktop publishing is designed to make print look pretty. And if print isn't the primary thing you're doing anymore, you don't need as much of it. So it naturally fades into the background. And your users don't want print anyways. Your users want web. They want in-app. They want digital content that's digitally closer and more available than a PDF.
Right. I mean, I think we see that in our everyday lives. The car I bought, well, right before COVID, has the big manual is not really available anymore. It's all a small manual, and everything else is in line on the computer screen in the car. The only way that's possible is that you've gone to this kind of component system where you're able to do those kind of things. And the other thing we said about is their spend on translation stuff has gone down dramatically. It's gone down by 40% or something like that, even though they're doing more translation. They're doing more products and more projects, but since there's less content that needs to be translated each time because they've already done it before, their spend on translation has gone down dramatically. So they're really happy, and and they've got the numbers to prove it.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic result. And the thing that I really like about these projects, and the savings on translation costs, it's great. It's easy to make an ROI out of it. But I really feel like the savings on translation costs are what pay for the ability to do the big fun things. I always, whenever we talk about translation costs, I always want to remind people that it's just the thing you use to pay for the ability to build a truly modern digital first customer experience. Because that, in my mind, that's what's compelling for your customer. That's what's compelling for your employees. And I don't want to lose sight of that. So we've got some questions that have come in. I want to grab a couple of these for you. So the first one, I'm going to read it here. It says, I may have missed this when you were touting the benefits of Harmonizer, as you did very well. As you did very well was me, by the way. Does Harmonizer analyze graphics to identify screenshots that are used in multiple source files? That's a great question. I'm actually really curious to hear the answer about this.
Okay, so Harmonizer itself works with text, so it doesn't do those screenshots. So I suppose you could OCR it and then have text, and then you could work with it, but that's not what it's doing. We've done work with comparing of image analysis, which might be transferable to this, but it was more to identify plagiarism and stuff like that in technical documents. So we can identify images that are similar to each other, but we're not really that. I think the scope of Harmonizer, the way we have it constructed now, is to deal with text and very large volumes of text.
So I'll add something in here that I think is interesting. So one of the things that you can do when you have your images in a CCMS, like Pareto, is that they'll be checksummed, which means that the image itself is run through a filter that gives a number out the other side that says this image is this. So if your images are exactly the same, it's exactly the same screenshot, that checksum will be exactly the same. And you can run a search to see, do I have the same image uploaded in a bunch of places? by the fact the metadata is the same in saying it has the same checksum. So if that's the case you're solving for, there is a way to solve for that that I think is pretty easy, frankly.
Right.
So we're running over time here, but we've got another question, which is more of a comment that I want to grab. It said, our education department has a website, but all the content is in PDF files, which I think we've all seen before, and is not ideal as a creator of that website or a user of that website. So I think, the underlying question here for this user is, what if I want a better experience? What's the path forward on that?
So the obvious path forward is to move it all into components and into a DITA system. I think it's very difficult to deal with while it's still in PDF. I think it needs to be moved out of PDF to be able to work with it, and that is what we do. I mean, we do literally millions of pages of material that's in PDF that moves into some format of XML, and I think that's the way that would be the way to go forward if the budget is there to do it. Obviously, it's I think while it's in PDF, it's very difficult to actually work with it. Although if there's depending on what kind of PDF it is, it's probably things that can be done. I mean, I think it gets into a whole complicated. That's probably a whole other segment of a show like this to talk about what do you do with PDF files if you don't have all your budget yet to move everything over.
Yeah, I hear you. I think some people have to move them over in pieces. Some people have to prioritize the things that are the best for the customer experience. And the inverse of what we were saying a second ago about the localization cost paying for the good stuff. The inverse of that is also a little bit true. Is that sometimes it's harder to do a back of the napkin ROI, like a hard one without localization costs. I think it holds a lot of organizations back. So what you have to do if you don't have the hard ROI from the localization costs is you have to go and get your ROI from customer retention, customer experience, and then support costs. So here's the thing that's really crazy is that the cost for solving a problem with a help site is like 1,500% less than with a phone call. So there's another way to get to your ROI. But we're running up on our time. We try to keep this really short and tidy and get everybody back to their day, not take your entire lunch hour. If you're on the East Coast, I guess that is. So I want to thank you for being here, Mark. It was really a pleasure having you and learning more about Data Conversion Laboratory and this really cool project that you guys did. I want to thank everybody else for attending and joining us today. Please leave us a rating, leave us any other questions. We love feedback, comments, anything you can provide us. So I'm Patrick Bozick for Hereto and Win with Content. Thanks again for being here. And we'll talk to you all next time.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.